Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. We're continuing our third lecture series. We're learning about where sociology comes from so we can try to understand more in the coming lectures and months of this class how sociologists think about the world and why they think that way. Well, today you're going to meet a guy named Auguste Comte, who is the founder of our field. Now, Auguste Comte was French, and he was a child of the Enlightenment. He also understood the importance of things like the French Revolution. In fact, he was born right at the end of the French Revolution. He understood how these ideas would come to change his nation and society in general for a very long time. Now, as a thinker, he goes to college and finds out that there really isn't a field that's interested in studying this whole idea of how individuals interact in society and how that shapes the decisions that they have. Now, along the way of thinking about this idea and actually changing from an interest in biology, strangely enough, to this new field of sociology, which he would create, sociology benefits from the fact that Auguste Comte creates something he calls a positivist philosophy. Now, positivist philosophy is not like I'm positive all the time, I'm nice to people, so I'm a positive philosopher. Not like that, no, not at all. In fact, Auguste Comte was simply thinking with positive philosophy that we can understand true knowledge using our senses. Simply put, we can understand the things happening around us using our senses. This really isn't a revolutionary idea. In fact, it's pretty much something that he borrowed carte blanche from the Age of Enlightenment. Chemists did that all the time. They would mix two things together, and then they would watch and observe and take notes, and they would say, oh, okay, through my senses, like your eyes, your ears, your nose, you realize that things have changed. Well, he felt that the same thing held true for understanding how the individual experienced our society. Now, this inadvertently creates a foundation for how sociology works today, trying to understand exactly how society functions. Now, at first, and it sounds a bit comical today, he thought there might be some natural law that explained how individuals behave. In fact, he uses the term social physics to describe this new field for some time before he finally settles on a term, sociology, around 1839. And the whole point of this new field, sociology, would be about, can we find ways to make things go better than the French Revolution and that reign of terror? Can we think about the past and the present so that individuals in the future can make better decisions? Simply put, an idea that follows through even today. Now, it's exciting because in figuring out how this new field would function, Auguste Comte put it all out on the table, and it's really, really extraordinary that all these ideas still hold true today. It also relates, too, to why sociology feels so similar to the hard sciences like chemistry and geology and so forth. Now, with sociology, he felt that this brand new field needed to analyze the central elements of the social systems. Fair game. We can do that. In fact, we still do that today. Our first commitment to observe society comes from this very idea. Next, because Comte was a child of the Enlightenment and was thinking about this amazing thing, the scientific method in which scientists could evaluate each other's work and make sure they were creating rational knowledge, he wanted us to use concrete methods. In fact, this ends up being a central idea that sticks with sociology, and it's something reinforced by the people who thought about sociology after Auguste Comte. Finally, he wanted us to establish testable generalizations, hypotheses, about social systems. Again, something right out of the scientific method. We do these things even today. My papers and book and publications, when I write them, follow these very same ideas. The cool thing is you'll come to find out in a later lecture, that society is a little strange to study, and Auguste Comte didn't predict that, so we have some of our own research methods, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Now, with Auguste Comte, he wrote a really extraordinary thing called the Course in Positive Philosophy. This was something that took him over a decade to write. It was really like a multi-part book, as I understand it, almost like a telecourse or an online course for his time, where you could read through the different sections of the book, and it was almost as if you were taking the class with this person while they walked through the ideas. It was apparently a common thing for that time and place. Now, with this book, The Course of Positive Philosophy, Auguste Comte gives us really our first big sociological theory, something evident in our definition of society, and that's the idea, are you ready for this, that society changes. Now, it seems like it's a common idea. Everybody's like, yeah, of course society changes. But nobody had thought about it until then. This was a big moment where we're like, oh, society changes. Wow, that's huge. How does society change, Monsieur Comte? Well, Auguste Comte would argue that it started in a more or less theological stage, a period of time in which society was shaped by the laws of tradition, where we understood things like hierarchy and being subordinate to kings and maybe even the church at the time, and that we basically followed what we were told to do and we didn't question it. There was no question of why do we make decisions. It's just we make the decisions because they're given to us. Next, we would proceed over time through a metaphysical period. And this was a strange one. This was sort of a period of time in which people started asking questions, but maybe didn't have the tools to really test these ideas. Does society change? How could we prove that society changes? We didn't have internet or YouTube back then, so it was really hard to make a lot of arguments, This metaphysical period may have described something leading up to the Age of Enlightenment. I'm not really sure. But it could have been something that was thinking about that idea of we started to ask questions but didn't have the tools to really follow through on it. Now, his last step, what he called this positive or scientific change period, was something where society was now empowered to be able to ask questions and to test ideas and to understand itself in a very different sense. So Auguste Comte, in a matter of really like a decade and change, has not only created this field, but he's created the foundations of how it would function for the rest of its days. And then it's kind of interesting. He continues to write and think and publish and do all sorts of cool things, but he just sort of sets this aside. He doesn't consider himself to be the first sociologist. Instead, he creates the foundations for how the field would operate, and then he sets them aside for future scholars to see who might pick up that book. Well, in our next lecture, we're going to talk about 3 people who picked up that book. One being our first sociologist, and the other 2 being what we call political economists. It's sort of a kind of sociology where you're thinking about the relationships of power between the political systems and the economic systems. The first one, though, is a sociologist that all sociologists come from even today. All of our lines go back to this first guy. So that's where we're going to start. If you got any questions about Auguste Comte, feel free to email me. He was an extraordinary guy. If you got questions, you let me know. Make sure to keep up with your quizzes, and we'll talk soon. See ya.